But how did we get to, let's just talk about, how did we get to the religions you see in the world today? If you go to museums, go to any museum and look at ancient culture, and you'll start seeing paganism is underlying all. Remember a couple days ago or yesterday, I talked to you about how we're getting close to enshrining paganism as a global religion in the earth worship part. But where did the paganism we see in Romanism, you say, what paganism is in Romanism? Where in the Bible is Lent? Where in the Bible is the 40 days of Lent? Where in the Bible is purgatory? It's not in the Bible. Where in the Bible are all the orders and things that we see in all the colors? And how about the rosary? Where in the Bible does it say Mary is the co-mediator with Christ? And where does it say that the saints are the ones we pray to? Where? It doesn't. Where did all that come from? Well, it's what we would call Romanism. And Revelation 17 reminds us Satan's first convert was Cain. Remember, he offered what he wanted instead of what God asked for. And John reminds us that in 1 John 3:12. And Satan's church officially began at the Tower of Babel. And at the Tower of Babel, humanity united against God and said, we're going to build a tower that reaches to heaven. We don't need God. We're going to go to heaven. We're going to unite, and we'll build our ziggurat. Now, if you ever like reading about this, the connection between Cain, the Tower of Babel, the beast of Revelation, and the final world religion, this is something on Amazon. This is an ancient historian, and he spent his lifetime, his name is Alexander Hislop, looking at all the Mesoamerican and Central American and Middle Eastern and Mesopotamian and everywhere else in the world, and found the linkage between all of those religions. So basically, Revelation 17 is a contrast between Satan's religion, this harlot, the whore, the one with the name on her, from Babylon. See, the Tower of Babel is when Satan launched his church, and the true bride of Jesus. Now remember, Paul says in 2 Corinthians 11:2, I have betrothed you as a chaste virgin to Christ. So you and I are engaged to Jesus. Wow. If any of you are engaged in this room, you are hyper connected to whoever that person you're going to marry. I mean, you think about them all the time, and whenever you have a free moment, you're communicating with them, and you're counting the days till you get married. And I mean, you're already just, I mean, if you're a girl, you're thinking of the wedding, and if you're a boy, you're starting to sweat thinking about how am I going to afford this and take care of her and everything, you know. And so there's just two different reactions, but it's amazing how much it's on your mind. We're supposed to be thinking about Christ all the time, in love with him, following him, listening to him. But what happened at Babel? Well, the Tower of Babel, if you read about it in history, was a significant time for the explosion. Did you know we find the same basic religions everywhere, from Polynesia to all of the Asian religions, all the African religions, all the South American and Central American and Native American religions all have common threads in them. Now, I'm not talking about the Native Americans as in what used to be called the Indians. I'm talking about the earlier people. Have you ever, there's an earlier group of people that came here and migrated. I mean, every scientist understands and talks about that. They came over from Asia, and they built all those amazing structures like the Cahoica, over in the area around St. Louis. There are huge areas that they built that we don't even know how they constructed all these things. Boy, they've got them all through Central America. You've all heard of all those stepped pyramids. And I mean, where did the things on Easter Island come from, those giant statues? And where, they're all over the world, Minoan and all that stuff. Where did all that stuff come from? It all comes, if you study, from the Tower of Babel. Because everyone spoke the same language, and they all got indoctrinated with this religion. Now, basically, there's a guy named Nimrod. He's named in the Bible. It said he was a mighty hunter. He founded, not only did he find Babylon, he founded the Akkadian civilization, Akkad, and he founded all these cities. He was this very amazing guy named Nimrod. His wife's name was Semiramis. Oh, she shows up. She shows up in the Bible. Her son was called Tammuz. He shows up in the Bible too. He shows up in the Bible in the worship of the Arameans and Syrians, only Semiramis becomes called Ishtar, and her son is still called Tammuz. Who are they? Nimrod's wife had this son. Now it goes into myth, because she said her son was out hunting one day and he didn't come home for supper. Her little son, her young son, like a teenage son. And she felt bad and she went looking for him, and she found a wild animal had killed and torn him up in pieces. So she took a basket and she picked all the pieces up and put them in the basket and put the lid on and put it on the shore of the Tigris River, and she wept for 40 days. And after 40 days, Tammuz came out of the basket and rose from the dead. That's where Lent comes from. That has been worshipped by pagan cultures the 40 days prior to the resurrection of Tammuz. How did that get to be in the Catholic Church? Good question. It keeps moving from Tower of Babel, the Arameans in Syria, into Phoenicia. Semiramis, her name there is Ashtaroth. Oh, that's in the Bible too. The pillars to Ashtaroth. What's her son's name? Baal. That's all the way through the Bible. Then we get to Egypt. What's mom's name? Isis. What's her son's name? Osiris. Then we get to Greece and the whole, Mount Olympus crowd. Aphrodite. What's her son's name? Eros, or we get the word erotic from it. Then the Romans rename her to Venus, and look, now we've got an American character there, Cupid. You ever seen Cupid at Valentine's Day? He's the little chubby baby shooting arrows at people. But actually, Cupid is Eros, is Osiris, is Baal, is Tammuz, is part of the original religions. And when they show up in the Bible, it's in Jeremiah, we certainly can't get into Jeremiah. Jeremiah is the longest book of the Bible in words, Hebrew words. Has more words than Genesis or Psalms. This is the single longest number of words book in the Bible. Jeremiah 44 talks about the Queen of Heaven. And the Queen of Heaven is Semiramis, and it's worshiping cakes with a T stamped on them, and bowing toward the east, toward the sun, and it was an entire pagan, idolatrous, horrible religion the Jews got involved in. And it involved 40 days of mourning and awaiting the resurrection and worshiping Tammuz. But what is Semiramis called in Jeremiah 44, 17 and 19 and 25? She's called the Queen of Heaven. What is Mary called in the Roman Catholic Church? The Queen of Heaven. How did they get that? Well, that's what it's interesting for you to read the history of Romanism and read how the centers of this worship kept moving till it got to Pergamos, where, remember, Satan's seat was. And then Julius Caesar liked all that, and when he went through there, he brought all the priests of Semiramis and all of this worship, and he brought them to Rome. And they brought the same thing the Pope wears. It's just unbelievable what you can read from history, but it came with the Romans.